Hi everybody, it's Greg. We are back for chat number 2 in a brand new series I am calling Seeing the Light in Uncertain Times. It's a brand new informal conversation series associated with my old podcast, Life on Purpose. We're going to be uploading the video version of this, which is a bit of a new thing for me. I'm still getting my training wheels on with video, something I haven't done a whole lot of. And then we're also going to port the audio version of this over to the Life on Purpose podcast. We'll do that a few times later. But I am very, very excited today to have a guest joining me from the Boston, Massachusetts area. Elizabeth Shaw is an eternal optimist, entrepreneur, and speaker. She's building a world of optimism by inspiring everyone around her to believe in the best for themselves, in each other, and in the unlimited possibilities of the world. Boston is her home base, but California, Paris, and Bologna, Italy are all places she also considers home. I am very proud to call her my friend and my fellow optimist in our League of Optimists. We will talk about that. But joining me via Skype from Boston, Massachusetts, it's Elizabeth Shaw. Elizabeth, great to see you today.
You too, Greg. Thank you so much for having me and also for spearheading our League of Optimists. That has been like an anchor for me lately, and I'm so grateful for you and for our League of Optimists.
Yes, I was. We'll fill people in on this. For those of us of a certain age who watched cartoons and Saturday morning cartoons in our youth, and I watched far too much TV in my youth, I'm happy to admit that. There was one particular cartoon called The Super Friends, and it was these superheroes. It was like Superman, Aquaman, Wonder Woman. There were all these, and they had this like cloud thing that floated up in the air somewhere, and they had like this little like League of Justice, I think it was called, or whatever, and they all like got to hang out together and then like do good things in the world. And in the world, when I met Elizabeth and we started talking about optimism over time, in my mind I started imagining this League of Optimists, like the optimists of the world would band together. Because we are both flag-waving optimists, and we would band together, and then we could be in this little fortress of optimism or whatever it was. Anyway, it became a hashtag and a fun little thing in my mind, and especially now in these very, very uncertain times when we're all dealing with a lot of uncertainty and fear and unknown. It's a fun meme to bring to mind as we're all dealing with this. So.
And I'm always mentally like donning my cape. And one of my favorite artists ever has a phrase that says, I'm fairly certain that given a cape and a tiara, I could save the world. So yeah. I'm wearing my optimism cape, waiting for the tiara still, but
Awesome. Here we are. Well, I met Elizabeth, I believe it was 2 summers ago at Camp Good Life Project. Jonathan and Stephanie Fields ran an amazing camp up in the foothills of the Catskills in New York for the Good Life Project. It was summer camp for adults. And I met an amazing group of people that are my tribe. They're my people. And I've been fortunate enough to be part of a number of communities over the recent years. And the WDS community, for instance, and the Good Life Project community are 2 of the biggest. And it was an amazing discovery to meet Elizabeth and discover her book. And she was there at camp that summer and was very, very kind enough to give me a copy of her book. And because I am a flag-waving optimist myself, I carry this book around the world with me. And it's kind of fun. I don't know if you'll even be able to see this on the camera. I've been able to take photos of her book in fun little places around the world. So for instance, if this thing actually works, like here's a photo of her book in Vernazza, Italy, in the Cinque Terre back in October. And I have a photo of it in Mexico, in San Miguel de Allende, and in Paris, sitting near the Eiffel Tower. It's just kind of fun because I like being able to be anywhere in the world and think, okay, it doesn't matter what challenge I'm going through. It doesn't matter where I am in the world. In the end, I have to come back to a belief in optimism. It's one of my superpowers. And you say on the back of your book, optimism is a superpower.
Absolutely. I firmly believe that. And it's a superpower we all need more than ever right now.
Yeah, you talk about your cape and your tiara and things. And so, Elizabeth, I just want to start with something from your book, which is really, really, really timely. Because you wrote this book you would think, okay, somebody writing a book about optimism would have written a book at a time in their life when everything was rosy and hunky-dory and going well. And yet in the conclusion of your book, in the closing, you write that you were being quarantined. You actually used the word quarantine, which is like, I was like, whoa. I was looking at it this morning. I was like, she's in Italy and she's quarantined. Like, and here we are in the middle of the COVID pandemic, March 2020, and we are all self-quarantined right now. So interesting timing, Elizabeth, that we're having this chat right now, and that when you wrote this book, you were quarantined for part of the book.
I need to go back and read that section. I don't remember using that word, but I absolutely was stuck in my apartment during that time.
Yeah. Well, I want to read a quote that you put in here, because sometimes it's funny because people forget what they write and they forget what they say. And I did 250 of these shows before I put the show on hiatus. And so people will be like, yeah, remember that episode you did with blah, 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 and you talked about this thing? And I'll be like, no, I don't remember that. But thank you for reminding me of that. And I love this because I think it's really applicable. You said life doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. I wanted a perfect ending. Now I've learned the hard way that some poems don't rhyme. Some stories don't have a clear ending, middle and end, or beginning, middle, and end. Life is about not knowing, having to change, taking the moment and making the best of it without knowing what's going to happen next. Delicious ambiguity. Ambiguity, that's a hard word to say quickly. And that's a quote from Gilda Radner, who was an awesome human that I was a big fan of. Yeah, I like that. And I thought, it's pretty applicable right now. Delicious ambiguity. Here we are. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of a time where our entire planet is quarantined and shut down. We don't have a clue what's next. And
ambiguous times, that is for sure.
And so, obviously, I was really excited to have this question and this conversation with you today, because all of this will beg the question, and this is a long, winding answer we'll get to, but how on earth do we stay optimistic in these times when we don't know, when we're all afraid, when we're all having our freak out moments? So let's just start with a check-in. I did this last week with Shelley. How are you doing?
I admit that I definitely have freak out moments too. I have some good days and I have some challenging, or as I've started to try and reframe it, clarifying days. But these are uncertain, ambiguous times, and it can be hard to be optimistic, but I think it's absolutely still possible to be optimistic. And I absolutely am still optimistic, even on these bad days.
Right. Yeah. Well, what I like about you and your philosophy in your book is that there's a practical element to it. You write about and talk about, and you and I in personal conversations have talked about, as friends, that even when we're having these days where we don't feel like climbing out of bed, we just want to stay in bed all day. We just want to sit in the not knowing and the fear and it's not going the way I thought it was going to go. Somehow we have tools and we can take action and we can do little tiny things even that help move us towards or back to optimism. So we were talking pre-show and we were talking about, okay, well, we're both having times where we're just not feeling it. Everybody's like, oh, you got to step up now. And I've been one of those guys. Hey, you got to use your superpowers. You got to step up. But I had some dark days over the last week, to be honest. And there are days where I just didn't know, what am I going to do? How am I going to get forward? And so how have you been dealing with that? How have you been coping with that?
It's gone in different waves or cycles. And it's funny that you referenced my book, because I think back to actually writing about these things in my book, and I forget that sometimes. I need to go reread my own book again. Maybe that's what I'll do this weekend. But my first response is always some action, because I definitely have a propensity for action, as many people do, because I think that for me, optimism is about the potential for things to be better. It's not necessarily about what we're in exactly at this moment being all rosy and sunshiny. So my first response as this pandemic started to become as extreme as it is, was how can I serve? And I did that on a very small scale. It wasn't on social media. I wasn't out there for the world to see. It was calling my neighbor and just asking, did she need anything? And checking in with all of my friends and seeing what in my small little circle I could do that was tangible and made me feel like I was making progress.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I realized and what I was reminded of really is that I sometimes use that propensity for action to avoid the uncomfortable feelings. And so now lately I've been leaning more into the stillness, the reflection, the clarifying. What can I learn from this time? How can I take a moment for pause and see what's being illuminated, to see where I can contribute in more meaningful and lasting ways? And that's still where I am. I'll come back to action again, I think, but I'm still in a little bit of quiet time.
That is so crucial. I think that's the thing. If the lessons of the past few weeks for me, like you, I wanted to jump into action. How can I serve? What can I do? How can I show up? But you have to serve yourself first. You have to honor where you are. And so if we are in a place where, you know what, the most I can do today is just care for myself. Because we can't serve other people. We can't give to other people if we ourselves are not in a position where energetically we've taken care of ourselves first. And, you know, there's a lot of people that I know that are givers, helpers, Enneagram 2s. You know, there's like, I'm a 2. There's, you know, your Sparketype. We were talking pre-call about Jonathan's Sparketype system. We'll talk a little more about that later. But, you know, depending on what your propensity is, your personality type is, how you show, you know, your usual way of showing up in the world, we want to jump out and help other people. But right now it's so crucial that we honor where we are and help ourselves. And you were telling me that you just said, you know what, I think I need to dial it back a little bit right now. You used the word quiet.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And
is that hard for you?
I feel guilty for it. And that's, I think, one of the things that I've been struggling with is I am that Enneagram 2. I'm that helper. I want to be out there doing everything for everyone else. And so I feel like in some ways I'm failing if I'm taking that time to be quiet, because it feels selfish, and it shouldn't. I know that. I've learned these lessons, like what you shared about we have to take care of ourselves so that we're serving from a full cup instead of an empty vessel.
Yeah.
But it's still, that inner part of me struggles with that a little bit, because I feel like I could be doing more. I should be doing more. All those, you know, shoulds. We shouldn't should on ourselves anymore.
Shooting ourselves to death. Yes.
Yes. But I was encouraged by what you were sharing about the things that are non-negotiable for you and how you're taking care of yourself. And I would love that encouragement, again, just as a reminder of what I can be doing too. Yeah,
well, let's put a little shout out to our friend Christopher Carter. Casey has been a friend and a mentor in a way, and just a person who's been a tremendously valuable human in my life in recent years. We met quite a few years ago now at WDS, and then he implored me to come to Camp GLP, and if I hadn't done that, I might not have met you and most of my tribe, and like so many important people in my life and clients and all sorts of things. And I did a course with Casey 6 years ago, and I had been a yoga practitioner for a number of years. I was practicing Kundalini yoga, and meditation was a very off and on thing for me, but it's something I always knew would potentially be valuable for me. And so in Casey's This Epic Life course that we took, he implored us to identify what he called non-negotiables and make sure that every day those were literally non-negotiable things in our day. And I thought, you know, why am I not meditating? And this came from Casey. He said, well, for meditation, oftentimes And I really recognize this in myself. If I waited till later in the day, I'm going to meditate today. I have the desire to meditate. I have the intention to meditate. I'll do it later. Later comes, you're tired. You forget. It just doesn't happen. Like the percentage of times it happened was small. And so I literally had to develop this routine where I get out of bed, before I shower, before anything else, the very first thing I do every morning is I downloaded this amazing app called Insight Timer. And I was lucky enough to interview the CEO of the company. If you go to lifeonpurposeshow.com, you can listen to a great interview with him talking about that app. It's a free app. It will remain free forever. And I go on Insight Timer and either set the timer or I listen to one of the tens of thousands of guided meditations that they have there. And I meditate. And then I do energy work that I learned from my friend Angie Schwartz from Life Purpose Advisor and some friends and teachers and healers that I've learned along the way. And those are non-negotiable. It happens every day. It doesn't matter how I feel. I just roll out of bed and I have to do those. And if I don't, I notice a difference in my day. I notice it. And I've been doing it for 6 years now. And so, but then there are other things that aren't quite as non-negotiable. We talked about this pre-call, but things like moving my body. Like it's easy now, we're all quarantined. And you're all supposed to stay inside, right? But you can go outside. If you don't go to a crowded beach or a crowded park or something, there's no rule that says it's actually very good for you, the sunshine and the fresh air. And so I've been trying to get out and walk every day, 30, 40 minutes. I'm lucky to live in California where it's temperate weather and I can move my body. And even if I really don't feel with it, just somehow get my shoes on my feet and get out that door. And even if I tell myself it's going to be 5 minutes and then I get out there and I was like, oh, this feels good. Okay. I didn't think I felt like walking today, but I'm moving my body. Or I'm doing some creative thing. I've gotten back to podcasting. I've gotten back to playing music again. I've gotten back to putting these little videos together. And even if they're not perfect, even if they're not, public ready in my mind, there used to have to be this level of perfection. I'm a recovering type A perfectionist, I say. So, you know what?
Me too.
There's flubs. Put it out there. It sounds good. People enjoy it. But here's the crucial concept in all of that. And this is something I really want to talk about. For me, those are all things that at some level I need the most. And if I put them out there, it's funny that other people say, hey, you know what? That's pretty cool. It resonates with me too. And you wrote about this in your book. And this was one of the aha moments when I read your book. I'm like, Elizabeth's one of my people. That's how I knew you're one of my people. You talked about in your book this concept of, and we talked about this on Life on Purpose. If you go back to the archives, every single week in the archives, I mentioned this to my guests. I did it for years and years and years. And some of my guests were familiar with the concept. Some of them be like, oh, I never thought about it that way. But yeah, it makes sense. It's the number one lesson I learned in 8 years of podcasting. We best teach that thing we most need to learn or remember. There is no more true thing in my universe that I have learned. That is a belief. And you talk about beliefs in your book. We'll talk about that later. But that is a belief of mine that we best teach that thing we most need to learn. And so that applies to creativity and putting my stuff out there when it's not perfect and sharing, doing this in a very imperfect setting. Where I don't have my big radio guy microphone in a studio that I used to have, blah, blah, blah. I'm just, staying with my parents and right now because I'm still nomading in my life and using earbuds and whatever. It's just, we're making it work. And, but it also applies to optimism.
Absolutely.
Why am I an optimist? Why am I teaching? Why do I want to wave that flag? Why do I want to have conversations about possibility and optimism? Because I need to remember those things myself first. How does that apply to you?
Seeing as you did just quote it from my book, I agree wholeheartedly.
Yes. Right.
Very wise words that were just spoken.
You did, right. You wrote them. So it was like I said, it's about resonance, and when you find your people, you find your tribe, you find, you read something, you're like, yeah, this is my book. These are my people. These are there you go.
And I think that's probably contributes a little bit to my quietness right now in that I know that I'm going to have something to say. I know I'm going to have an inspired answer to how do you stay optimistic when we are all quarantined because of COVID-19? But I need to reflect on that first. Like, I need to figure out and process it a little bit so that I'm teaching or sharing things that are actually useful to me. And I'm not just spouting something that I read online or anything that feels inauthentic. I feel like I could easily say, okay, here's your 10-step guide to being optimistic. But that's not going to be real. And what's real is the way that we started this conversation. There are good days and bad days right now for everyone.
Yeah.
And even the people who are out there writing the next great novel and putting out their brand new course in business, and, it all looks shiny and perfect in this time. I'm certain that they're having bad days too, because this is unprecedented uncertainty that we're in. I mean, go back 100 years and yes, they had similar experiences.
But in our lifetimes, we haven't experienced, none of us have experienced this before.
I think the closest thing that we've experienced collectively in recent times is September 11th.
Yeah.
And so I'm really trying to tune into what is helping me stay optimistic right now, and then how do I share and teach that instead of just kind of resting on some laurels of, I wrote a book on optimism once, so that all applies perfectly now, because it doesn't.
Right. Yeah, no, it doesn't apply at all. It just, I posted to Facebook yesterday. I had this really odd moment where I've avoided like to-do lists. It's been about self-care and taking care of the moment, and, everything else just dropped away. Our world changed so quickly. Everything changed quickly. And so I was like, there's probably a whole bunch of stuff I should be doing right now. The old like tape loop is, I'm probably missing a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm like, well, it's probably not that important anymore, but I should go look just in case. So of course, I go back and start checking, and I've like spent years and years trying to figure out a system of to-do lists that work for me. And so I have this funny system where I have two primary email addresses, and I email myself back and forth, which is totally archaic, weird, funny, but it works for me. And so I have all these random like back and forth to-do lists on email. So I finally went back and looked at the list, and then go back and further and further. And I just had it was just a really surreal moment of none of this is relevant anymore. It was like going back, it was 16 days was the last time I had updated my to-do list, which I'm happy about. I'm happy through the pandemic, I haven't been trying to keep up my to-do list. I call that a victory. Okay.
Absolutely.
That's a victory. And so, but then when I did look at the list, I was like, it was all stuff in late March, April, May. I'm like, canceled, not relevant, maybe, no, maybe, canceled, not relevant. The whole list was just stuff that it's 16 days ago. We've never been at a time in our lives where just all of a sudden everything that was important, and it doesn't mean everything, because obviously there are core things that are always going to remain true. Our family, friends, the people we love, the people we hang out with, the ultimate work that we want to do in the world, those stay the same. But the immediate stuff was all changed. That was weird.
Even the important things that you mentioned, I feel like there's been so much clarifying in them, because I really refined down the people I'm spending my time with right now. Mm-hmm. And it's not just because of the physical limitations, because certainly everyone is going online virtually, and there's so many opportunities to connect.
Yeah.
But I've had to kind of manage my own energy and my time and really prioritize, who am I going to connect with? How am I going to connect with them? What does that look like in ways that are meaningful and lasting? And I feel like that's going to have implications beyond this season. Yeah. I feel like my tribe is going to become more refined as we move out of this.
Absolutely. That's such a crucial concept, the fact that we get to choose going forward. And I think that many people, some of us have thought about these concepts for a while. Some people have never thought about these concepts. Everything's been on autopilot. So many areas of people's lives have been running on autopilot. And for me, the great gift of this pandemic, and there are many, and not to discount people who are suffering, people who've lost relatives, people who are sick or dying, And I don't mean in any way to be disrespectful or to mitigate the very serious, real nature of something like this. But there are always gifts in everything. And for me, one of the great gifts of this is that it is allowing us to be intentional in a way that so many of us have not been intentional in areas that we had not been intentional in before. And like you said, the hope, the optimist in me, is hoping that we were able to carry that forward so that when things do speed back up, when things get back to the quote unquote new normal, as you're hearing people talk about, whatever that looks like, and we'll talk about that. I want to talk about that concept, but that we're able to carry that, I guess just being able to be deliberate about it, being more deliberate in how we spend our time, where we put our energy and attention. Because there's only a finite amount of energy and attention. People think of time as a finite thing, but there's also only a finite amount of attention and intentional focus that we can give to things and energy. And that's what I think so much of the struggle that people have had in recent years was spreading too thin on all fronts. Energy, attention, time, too much. So now we're like, okay, what's really important? And now we're all self-quarantined and we have a lot of extra time to think about what's really important. Where do we want to put that time and energy and intention, both now and then down the line? We'll start to think about those things, I think.
And I don't think that anything you just said is actually diminishing the seriousness of what's happening with the pandemic. I mean, you mentioned that at the beginning when you read my bio, Bologna is one of my places that I consider home, and it's one of the hardest hit in Europe right now. And I have conversations on a daily basis with friends there who are losing loved ones and are losing friends, and it is heartbreaking. And it's also the conversations I'm having with them is the same that we're having right now.
Yeah.
How can you be more intentional with what you have? Like, don't take it for granted. Right. And, you know, we're still talking about, okay, who are the people that I want to invest my time in now? How do I get rid of that? I should do this list and focus on what I want to do and what's bringing joy and what's bringing connection and service and community. And so I think that the seriousness of the situation actually helps reinforce so much of that intentionality and clarifying.
Yeah. What's bringing you joy right now through all of the uncertainty and fear and all those things?
Finding ways to connect. And yes, it's happening online, but I have to tell you the silliest, it's actually not that silly, but my office is in my basement, and yesterday, and I have a Ring doorbell because I like to know when I'm down in my basement, is it worth me going up to my front door to answer the door if someone rings the doorbell? And also I'm usually home alone, and so there's like a safety factor. And I saw the UPS driver, he rang the doorbell and dropped something off. I literally like jumped out of my chair in my basement office, ran upstairs, chased him down the street, not to sign for a package, to be able to stand 6 feet from him and have a conversation with someone in like real time and real energy.
Awesome.
And I was just craving that connection that, you know, virtual is great as well, but to be able to be in someone's presence physically, it's a whole different thing. And that totally made my day yesterday. It's like the simplest little 5-minute conversation with my UPS driver brought me so much joy. That's
awesome. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the untold, one of the great untold, challenges of this time, people will tell this story at some point, is the lack of physical touch. I'm a very huggy person. And so, yeah, not being around, and I live by myself a good deal of the time. And so, yeah, just having those interactions of human touch and human interaction when you're able to be with other humans, they're gold. They're literally, they're medicine for me. And so now in this time where we can't hug anybody, we can't touch anybody, we can't, I'm even with my own family. And, I just got here a week ago and we don't know who's in, they say this stuff could live in your body for weeks at a time and nobody really knows. We're trying not to infect each other. And so where, it is like, I can't even hug my mom. That's tough. That is tough. And yet I know people are going through way, way, way worse. But, it's just one of those little things that I don't really, people aren't really talking about yet. But the toll of lack of real physical touch, some people are, married or have a partner and, they've been together. They're the people that they're sheltering in place with. And so that's happening. But, for those of us who do not have that, I just want to sympathize with you and, say that I understand what you're going through. And so it's been a big challenge, so, what
One
else?
thing I'm really excited about during this time is the sensitivity and appreciation it's going to give us for people who are experiencing things differently. Mm-hmm. And the conversations that are being forced because of it. One of the big conversations I was having yesterday along the lines of like the hugging piece is that I'm an introvert. And so people think, oh, you must be loving this time. You're sitting there reading your book right. and doing your work and all of that. And just because I'm introverted doesn't mean I don't crave that connection and want that time with people. Yeah. It just means that the way that I recharge my batteries is different than the way an extrovert recharges their batteries. But the connection piece is still really important. And so I've had more conversations with my extrovert friends of, no, this isn't any easier for me than it is for you. It's just different. And then how do we take those lessons and apply them going forward so that we are making something better from this situation?
I love that. That's great. Yeah. And it's just, and what you were referencing is about we make assumptions. It was necessary at a survival level at some point in an evolution, but because I was always labeled an extrovert. I guess I identify more as an ambivert now in my later years, later older adult years. But definitely as a younger person, I was a sort of raging extrovert. Not so much anymore. But yeah, but we make assumptions. Oh yeah, my introvert friends are all probably super happy. They get to blah, blah, blah. Or, the extroverts are struggling so much. But we shouldn't make assumptions because we don't really know what each person is going through. So thank you for pointing that out because, each of us, despite the overt labels or the labels that we've identified with or told other people, oh, I'm an extrovert, I'm an introvert. Yeah, we just don't really know. Each of us has an internal reality that is going to be different than the other people's, in neuro-linguistic programming terms, NLP, we have an IR that nobody can quite really know our IR. So,
I'm with you though. I still need more hugs.
Yeah, always. Right. Yes to more hugs. One of the things in the book you talk about, Elizabeth, is that you and I both self-identify as optimists. And, some people might say, well, that's just in me. I'm an optimist. And other people might say, like, I don't think I'm an optimist. I see the glass half empty, normally, or I used to, or whatever. But is optimism a skill you can learn? Is it?
Absolutely.
And I know the answer to this because I've read your book. But for those who have not, let's talk about that. Let's talk about people who say, well, I don't know. Like, I've never really thought I was an optimist. Like, talk to me about how that works.
I think many more people are optimistic than they recognize because anytime we do something to try and make a situation better, we try to serve someone, we try to improve the world around us, whether it's planting a garden or shoveling the driveway for your neighbor or taking flowers to someone, saying I love you. Like, those are all things that display optimism. And because you mentioned the glass half full scenario, like so many people think it's just about how we see the situation now. Like, oh, I should be able to see this in beautiful light and think that it's great. And that makes me an optimist. But I think that it's not how we see it, it's what we do with it. Mm-hmm. So, yes, we can talk about all of the great things that both you and I think will come from this time. Yeah. I also think it's pretty kind of challenging, sucky time at, in moments. Like,
yeah, let's be honest. Right.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it and be like, this is the best vacation I've ever taken in, Yeah. It's difficult times, and it's okay to say that. It's okay to embrace that and acknowledge it, because we are going to do something that makes it better. Like, okay, if you just want to give up and hide out in your basement and, not deal with the world, like I maybe do some days, but, every day, if that's your approach, maybe you are a little pessimistic. But as a whole, yes, to answer your question, it's possible to learn these things, because I think there's already parts of it that are ingrained in you too. Like, as a whole, there's something that we want to see better, I gave a lot of scenarios already.
Yeah, that's okay. No, that's great. And I love it in the book. You break things up into sort of three sections, and there's sort of three parts. It's optimistic mindset, practical optimism, and then living optimistically, like how do you apply those things? And so at the beginning, like for me, like when I started reading your book, like chapter 1 is called Believe in Possibility. And I was like, yes, I'm like, that's me. Like I always say that phrase. I always say like my twist on it is a little bit different. I say I am open to possibility. Like I'm always open to, and so, but at my core, I do believe in, rainbows and unicorns and a magical universe and whatever. Like I frame it in my, not such a, in my guy way. So, but in my Greg way. But yeah, I believe in possibility. And you have a quote from Albert Einstein, who's one of my favorite people, scientists, humans, who's so brilliant, far beyond his physics theories. I have on my, all of my social media pages are led off with an Albert Einstein quote, which is kind of similar to this one. But Einstein said, it's better to believe than to disbelieve. In doing so, you bring everything to the realm of possibility.
He was a smart guy.
He was amazing guy, super philosophical in his own way, spiritual, depending on how you define that word. Like he was a really amazing human in so many ways. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Al. And so, it's like as I was opening that up, and then you have a quote from Alice in Wonderland at the beginning of the book, and you sort of, broke it out. So I like having these tenets up front, of believing in possibility and transforming fear into curiosity, and obstacles or opportunities was chapter 3. Well, let's talk about that. Obstacles as opportunities, because I think it's really relevant right now.
Yeah, I think that's what so many of us are trying to do with this time, as we're, even if you're still in a quiet phase like I am, or in that diving into action phase, like what can we make of this season that we're in right now? And so for some people, that transition of obstacle to opportunity, I have so many friends that are parents of young children, and all of a sudden they are their full-time daycare. Their kids are home with them, in addition to them trying to maintain their jobs and, do all the other adulting that we're trying to do on a daily basis. And I know that there are days that they are just struggling because they feel like they can't juggle it all. But those obstacles of like, great, now my kids are home while I'm trying to work, they're turning it into, how can I use this time as a gift to bond with my kids, to connect with them in ways I don't normally get? We're seeing it, for relationships. It's sometimes bringing people together right now to have all this extra time and to learn things about each other. Like, I'm overhearing conversations my husband's having with his work colleagues and with his clients that I'd never be privy to. And so I'm like, wow, that's how you handle things. Like when you're in a work setting, that's amazing. Totally tapping into those skills now that I know you have that maybe I wasn't aware of before. And then, there's so many entrepreneurs that are shifting their business and trying to say, how can I serve more people in this time, and use virtual components to take my work to more people. And these are all things we could be considering obstacles. We could say, oh, because my kids are home, I can't get the same amount of work done, and so I'm a bad employee right now. Or, because I'm in the live events, like in-person events business, my entire business has shifted lately.
No, yeah. Well, same thing with me. Photography. Nobody's scheduling photo and video shoots right now. Like nobody's, they're all on hold.
And we could both say like, oh, well, I guess that's it for my business. Like, let's give up. But we're not doing that. You and I are having conversations about, okay, how can we be creative? How can we be curious about serving people differently right now? How can we know, and we both know this is not a season that will last forever. We know that those other pieces will come back. We'll gather together. We'll have in-person events. There will be that influx of business that will happen in the future. But we'll also see how we can create opportunities in the current time of obstacles and challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so crucial that we're both dealing with that. I mean, every one of us is dealing with that at some level, and so it's both a challenge of, okay, well, things have shifted. I have to pivot. And then what can that look like? So rather than, and it's okay. We don't I think it's really crucial to say, you said it up front, that we don't have to have all the answers right now, because there's part of my brain is thinking, I haven't figured it out this week. I don't know, like this week, what my new, strategy is going to be for the next few months. Like, I don't know yet. It's okay. Like, I don't have to know this week. I have food, I have shelter, I'm here, I'm in a safe place. Like, I'm good. Like my in Maslow's hierarchy, my base needs are met. Excuse me. And then, over time, the answers will reveal themselves. The answers will come if I'm open. And then that's what I talk about, being open to possibility. Is what I always try to do is, in health, energy, any aspect of realm of life, there's sort of a closed or an open. I mean, our computers are, it's a 1 or a 0. It's the circuit's either closed or it's open. And so it's like, open, can we be closed? And when we close down, we suffer. This is we're taping a live podcast in the middle of a pandemic, and my sister just walked into a taping of a show to offer me a smoothie. Sorry, so this is awesome. I'm hanging with my family. This is how we roll in the pandemic, sis.
Sorry, I just didn't do that to you before.
Thank you. My sister was kind enough to make me some extra smoothie. So it's like I'm like 15 again. I'm basically like living at home, and my sister is here as well, and there's her friend is here staying with us, and with my mom and stepdad, and she didn't know I was taping a podcast episode, so she brings me a smoothie. We're adapting.
But that's something to be grateful for. I mean, family that brings you food.
Right, absolutely. It's incredible. So, which is so funny. Back in the day, I would have been upset by these things. Maybe you're like, oh, we'll have to start. We'll roll it. You stop the tape. Let's cut that part out. No, that part's staying in. That's staying in the recording. Like, who's that? Who's that gal walking in there? That's my sister. So who was kind enough to make a grocery run for the family today, and keeping her 6 feet distance from everyone. But it was, yeah. I
want to carry on with the point you were making about things are either open or closed, because this is
it's a really crucial point.
Of a tangent, but a conversation that I've been having with a lot of clients, because we get so caught up in. We want some certainty. And so we try to be like, okay, I need my 25-step plan for what I'm doing for the next 3 months.
Yes.
Except we still don't know what things are going to look like in a month. And so a lot of these things that we're trying to like grasp so tightly as like, I need this certainty, it's unrealistic. And we're actually going to cause ourselves to spend more by being like so tightly closed into, trying to like grasp onto those things instead of just being open to the possibility and saying, okay, I have some goals, I have some plans, there's directions I want to move, but I'm going to be okay taking it a day at a time. And That's uncomfortable for a lot of us. It's uncomfortable for me a lot of times. I think you're much better at dealing with uncertainty than I am, even though I recognize being open and embracing it is actually going to be part of this process.
Yeah, well, you're human. You're a human being, Elizabeth, not a human doing. And so if we can remember that we are human beings and we don't have all the answers, we're not enlightened beings, but I think the most important thing is we have set the intention that we want to figure these things out. And I think just by starting with that, our intention is that we would like to figure these things out. And so that just kind of gets the snowball rolling down the hill. And we don't know how fast it's going to roll down the hill and how fast those answers are going to come. But if we set the intention that I'd like to figure some things out. I'd like to connect with people that are important to me. I would like to fill in the blank. We don't have to have the how. We don't have to have the plan. We don't have to have the timetable or the Excel spreadsheet. And that's not what this is all about right now. It's about getting back to where we are, setting some intentions, thinking through like what's serving us. And you talked about uncertainty, and that's a really crucial concept. And I learned this from our mutual friend, Jonathan Fields, who's been such an important person in so many people in my life, in their lives. Jonathan talked many years ago about the concept of uncertainty as muscle building. And fear, learning that you don't ever banish fear. You learn to lean into it, because you can't ever banish fear. It's just not in our human condition. You can sit in a cave for 30 years and meditate. You can do all these things. Probably not ever going to banish fear. It's so rooted in who we are, in our psyche, in our DNA, and our collective consciousness. It's going to show up. But you can learn to lean into it. You can learn to live with uncertainty. But you do that in increments, and it's muscle building. And so for me, learning to live with what I say radical levels of uncertainty was a process, and it wasn't necessarily one that I chose on purpose. Life worked that way. Life situations happened in a way that there were things in my life happening that I had to learn to deal with it. That was the only choice I had. And so many of us, that's the case. And so now this COVID-19, this pandemic, has given us the opportunity of great uncertainty and fear. And so we can start to learn to lean into that and to muscle build. And it does not mean that it's easy, but if we just set the intention that like, okay, I want to be a little better at that. I want to be a little better at learning to live with uncertainty and building that muscle around fear and figuring it out. We're going to be all right.
My rule for it during this time, like for living with the uncertainty, has been to lead with compassion.
I like that.
And to remember that applies to myself as well. And that's just what I'm using right now as my lens. Like it's a form of optimism. That is my lens, is compassion for myself and for everyone I'm encountering, because we are dealing with the uncertainty in different ways.
Yeah.
And we're at different levels of that muscle building. And being as compassionate as possible is one of the things that's making it, easier day by day.
Awesome. That's a great point. You mentioned in the book, in chapter 4, we're going to kind of wrap this up here pretty soon. You talk about belief. You say be rooted in belief in yourself, belief in a higher power, belief in wisdom. You like different areas of belief. Like right now, here in March 2020, Elizabeth, what do you believe?
Well, seeing as I just also wrote a blog post about this, except I used the word faith instead of belief. That's
totally fine. We can use the word faith. Insert the word that's most resonant for you.
But I do have faith in a higher being. I mean, for me, it is God, but it's also the universe, and that things are working for the best right now. It doesn't always feel like it, but I know that there is light on the other side. I have faith in myself and my resiliency. And I don't mean that with pride or like I just mean that in that I I recognize I've been through things before, and I trust that I'm going to be able to get through this and navigate it with as much grace and compassion and love as I want. Like, that's what I want to be sharing with the world, and optimism. And I have faith in the people that I care about and that are in my community, that we are going to show up for each other, that we're going to serve each other, that, you know, we're going to come through this even stronger together.
Yeah.
And I have faith in kind of our collective creative resilience and the things that we're going to learn and create during this time, and the things that will be refined as part of it. I have faith in so many things because I believe in possibility. I believe that the other side of this will be better than what we're in right now.
I share those beliefs, and that's why we are tribe. That's why we are flag-waving League of Optimists cohorts. And I think that's a good way to wrap things up today. I'd love to have another conversation at some point down the line, because we didn't really get into your backstory and a lot of other things that in normal non-pandemic conditions we would talk about. But we're coming up on an hour here, and I want to respect people's time. And I just think it's been a very pertinent and very helpful conversation for me. And hopefully it will be a conversation that serves other people out there as well. And I love the work that you do, and just your spirit and your optimism, and please continue doing what you do. And
Likewise.
I look forward to the future to see, you talked about the other side of this, and that is, you know, the to be continued conversation at some point is that I mentioned this on the interview last week with Shelley Duarte. I have a belief that there's going to be a new normal people keep talking about, and that one of the gifts of this is that I believe we get to co-create what that new normal looks like. And obviously there are a lot of factors. There are a lot of other things going on, but at some level we get to help co-create what that new normal is. And if we can say, you know what, in my own life, I want the new normal to include more optimism, to include more belief in possibility, to include more intentional and deliberate who I spend my time with, where my attention goes, how I spend my energy, the foods that I put in my body, the way that I move through the world, my non-negotiables, all of those things. Like, I am planting the intention now. I don't have to know how, but I'm setting the intention now that I would like that to be more of my new normal. So,
amen.
So if people are interested in all this, Elizabeth, how do they find you? Your book is called The Optimist Manifesto. It's Elizabeth Shaw. Where do they find your book? Where do they find you?
Many local bookstores carry it, and I totally advocate for trying to support them right now as they are struggling, especially during this time. But also my website, which is davine.com, although it's spelled differently than you hear it. It's D as in Apple, VINE, davine.com.
Go check out davine.com, folks, and buy your own copy and travel with it around the world, and send Elizabeth photos of the book in fun locations around the world, and she'll get a good kick out of that, and it'll serve you.
Nothing makes me happier.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been just a blessing to be able to have this conversation with you, and I value our friendship and continued conversations in the future. Looking forward to those.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And folks, if you like what you're hearing here on Life on Purpose, or whatever I decide to rebrand this as at some point as I figure things out, go to the lifeonpurposeshow.com website, lifeonpurposeshow.com, where you can find 250 archived episodes from Life on Purpose and Radio Enzo, my previous podcast. They're available there. You can find me on social media and all around the web. I'm on the Stitcher Radio app, on Apple iTunes, on the podcast app. At some point, I'm going to be ported over to Spotify. We're working on that right now, now that I've decided to restart this thing and restart the engine here. So thanks for joining us today. Until next time, I'm your host, Greg Berg. Take care.